to the first of our 4-part series. We're going to have a lot of great topics this month. And then finishing us off for the night is Isabel Grondin. She's the World Rugby Medical Education Manager attached to Rugby Americas North. She's been working in the rugby space for many years, and she's going to be addressing how to support player welfare in our communities and highlighting some really good quality resources that you can access. But I want to pass it over to Isabel now, so who's going to talk about supporting player welfare in your community and some resources.
Good afternoon, everyone. I guess evening for some of you, still afternoon for me on the West Coast. Let's see here. There we go. You should be seeing the PowerPoint now. Erin, can you give me a thumbs up? Fantastic. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for being so patient and hanging out and listening to all the great information. Opportunity here to have heard the 3 of us, but don't forget there's also opportunity in the coming weeks for different areas, and I think that that's really important. Both Rue and Dahlia are the perfect example of player welfare, of women that continue to evolve past their national team program participation into being there as women in the player welfare realm. So I always think of women's rugby with women in rugby. I'm an example of a woman who never played rugby, yet I've been involved in rugby for many, many years, and I think I'll just keep it at that. And I think that women, as they retire from the sport, also want to remain involved, and we want to bring women into the sport from that grassroots level and into the community game to stay involved. And Rue's mentioned a few of those as well, situations where, you know, do all the jobs for all the things. Well, the more of us there are, the more we can share those jobs. Today specifically, I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available and where we can participate in prevention, as well as pitchside care, and where our involvement can be supporting our regions, our clubs, our community as players, coaches, referees, strength and conditioning coaches, medics, and as well as administrators. So the platform that's probably the most realistic for this is the Passport platform. Some of you may already have been there under one or another auspice. There are many auspices. There is the player welfare from the medical standpoint, but there are also the laws, the officiating, coaching. There is Rugby Ready, which is a great access tool. And then there is also areas of knowledge within the Rugby Ready area. So I thought, you know, I too am a bit of an academic pursuant, and I thought maybe we could have a little quiz. So this is a true or false. I'm not going to make you reflect. I'm going to ask you to keep your own answers. There are 5 questions, and keep your own score as we go along. Okay, here we go. Question number 1, true or false? A mouth guard prevents against a broken jaw. So I'll let you write down your answer. The answer is true. Question number 2. There is no evidence that headgear provides protection against concussions. Answer is true. The warm-up should start with high-intensity exercise. False. Static stretches should not form part of a warm-up. Many of you know the answers here. Just keep answering your keeping your total of your trues or falses. So this one is a true. And the last little quick quiz, a cool down may help reduce injuries. And the answer here is true. So these are all basic premises, whether it's from the player welfare, from the strength and conditioning coach. I noticed there was a question earlier on about the FIFA 11 mentioned during Dahlia's presentation. And yes, there is, through the Activate new resource on World Rugby that provides exactly that. It is a warm-up specific setting that has been shown to reduce injuries in rugby players. Quiz gone now. Let's look at some of the other items in that landing page. So when you go into the landing page, sometimes it's also knowing how and where and how you get to the resources. So when you go into the landing page, you'll find multiple rolling screens in that front section, particularly between this area and this area, and then different areas of learning that you can definitely connect to. The great thing is most of these are in multiple languages, certainly English, Spanish, and French, which are the ones we meet mostly in RAN, but also worldwide multiple languages. And this is a basic player welfare.worldrugby.org. If you are interested in the concussion, Erin was quite clear and did that very well. It's such a large topic that we don't want to address it here, but I do want to push you towards some of the resources that are available. There is some video, there are some recognize and remove posters that you can download for your club, for your facility. The guidelines are, and again, in multiple languages. And of course, there are different formats that you can learn online. So these are all online learning modules for which you can simply log in to the playerwelfare.worldrugby site and do the online modules to seek some learning and increase your knowledge in that area. The other, of course, topic of right now is the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are multiple resources that have been placed online at this particular point in time to facilitate some knowledge. So there is the return to play guidelines, which are divided in multiple areas. Of course, the guidelines themselves that have been posted by World Rugby. There are also some template documents if you're trying to create something for your union or for your club, your community. This may be a way to present to the government in your area how you will return to rugby. Supplementary documentation and models of good practice, and these are all in men's and women's rugby. So it's important to realize that clubs function under many resources and with many people, and understanding that process is going to be key for the government to realize the importance, for example, of exercise, as was mentioned earlier. The guidelines, again, in multiple languages. There are 2 COVID courses, one that's designed more for coaches and players to help, again, protect your athletes and protect yourself as coaches, or assist and support as administrators the return post this particular COVID pandemic. When you go into the other information, I noticed there was a question about return to Dahlia, a question about a return to play, or play during pregnancy, or so there are lots of documents that are set in guidelines that are World Rugby set in this area. One of the things that's important is player load, and I think this is a key component when we talk about load with women, and Rue alluded to the requirements of trying to be everything to everyone and trying to meet outcomes. One of the important things with player load is to understand that there is ways of recognizing some of the challenges with player load, and also realizing that we need to be able to recognize and support this, and that we don't need to necessarily have high-end GPS technology, for example. The RPE scale will help us support and understand our players, our participants, our people, how they are able to meet and how they found a training session, or an on-field session, or an in the gym session, and be able to recognize that. I thought I would use just a short video to help us out with this particular portion.
As rugby grows and evolves, we've seen the workload of players increasing more and more. More games can mean more training, more travel, media and commercial commitments. With emerging evidence indicating that poor load management is a major risk factor for injury, both international rugby players and World Rugby looked at ways of preventing injury and therefore optimizing performance. So, what's it all about? Well, load management, as it's known, is not simply about playing fewer matches or training less frequently, but more about reducing the risk of injury through planning and smart management. When setting out the workload for a player, coaches should consider training can account for between 85 and 90% of a player's workload. It should be measured consistently and should be structured so that it avoids spikes in intensity and volume. These training spikes can lead to injury. The personal side or life load, which can include players who are studying, have young children, or have mental or social stressors outside of rugby. Remember, these can have an impact on performance. Travel, media commitments, and commercial duties, as well as learning rugby tactics, are usual for professional players nowadays, and coaches should remember this when planning training. It's all about making sure the batteries are not flat for match day. Coaches need to look out for high-risk athletes that require an extra focus. They include older players, players returning from injury, players in multiple teams, and new squad members who are not used to training in such intensive environments. At the same time, players should train hard and smart. High-risk training should be taken at low-risk times and shouldn't be carried out during periods of fatigue or travel. But players also need to train hard so that they're ready for the intensity that match day can bring. As well as GPS systems and graphs, they've often measured in RPE, rate of perceived exertion, where players mark out of 10 how intense the session was. Here you can see how a weekly training load builds gradually, thereby avoiding spikes. We can't predict injury, but we can manage the risk. Remember the 3 Ps: plan, prepare, ultimately perform.
So that gives us some ideas of how we may help manage this. And like I said, in the resources, there's certainly a wide variety of items. For example, there are some document guidelines on pregnancy or therapeutic use of exemption in some medications, some cardiac screenings, age relevance, as well as some things related to injury surveillance, prevention, and many other options around the COVID-19. Signposting is a key piece. So if we look at where we can find these resources, certainly the Passport website, the Rugby Ready website, and the Player Welfare website will help you locate the needed information for you to remain engaged, involved as women with women in rugby. I've provided here my email address. I know, being the last presenter, I was under the impression that perhaps I'd be short on time. So if I'm not able to answer your question, do not hesitate to contact me. If you are interested in becoming someone who may deliver some courses in the RAN regions, and you have a specific area of strength that you think you could share with others, or you want to participate and take efforts within some of the courses that are available for you, please do not hesitate to contact Scott Harlan, who's the Regional Training Manager, or, of course, the Training and Education Officer within your union. I'd like to thank you very much for your great time, and I want to make sure that we all stay involved and engaged as women in rugby.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabel. So if you have any questions for Isabel on the resources and the content that she presented, please submit that in the chat feature. So while we're waiting for questions, I just wanted to send out a huge thank you to all of our panelists for making themselves available and presenting on these really important and great topics. I also want to thank Alejandro, muchas gracias por interpretación, for interpreting and providing that translation for our Spanish-speaking community. And just a reminder, we're going to be doing these every Wednesday. So next week, if you haven't signed up for it, just get on the rugbyamericasnorth.com website and you can sign up for any one of the remaining 3 presentations. Next week is going to be Breaking the Glass Ceiling, which will particularly address getting more females in leadership positions within rugby, so particularly in administration, governance, board of directors, that kind of stuff. And we have 2 amazing presenters for that one as well. So I'm not seeing any other questions come through. I did want to address one question that did not get addressed to Dahlia, was just are there any studies regarding female rugby players and the ability to conceive post or during rugby? I didn't know if you had anything for that.
So I'm not sure in terms of specifically for rugby players, but I know there are a lot of studies in general for female athletes. Infertility is a very wide faceted topic and it has a lot of different causes for infertility, but more related to sport. Generally, some of the causes are things that I spoke about before, like the REDS, that's the relative energy deficiency syndrome, as well as just general menstrual disorders that could cause infertility. So that is one side that you would see in female athletes. Another issue with female athletes and fertility or conception is that it may not be an issue or problem, but one of the things that, I don't want to say a problem, but one of the things that is noted that the prime time to conceive is also the prime time when especially if you're an elite athlete, when you want to perform. So most women don't want to conceive at that period in time, and then they delay pregnancy until later on. And at an older age, there are different risk factors with getting pregnant at that age, as well as the ability to get pregnant, because of course, the older you get, there's a decrease in the quality as well as the number of eggs you have to conceive. So in terms of the studies per se, I can't say, but if the issue with getting pregnant at the point in time while you are training and it's related to any of the issues that I spoke about, like REDS or uterine fibroids or even endometriosis, the recommendation would be to talk to a gynecologist in terms of to get seen and investigated and getting a good treatment plan. In terms of timing of conception and deciding, well, that it's a bit of a personal decision as well as a personal decision as well as also taking into consideration the risk factors of either doing it then in the middle of your career, your sports career, or doing it later on where the risk may be higher.
Great. Thank you, Dahlia. And Isabel, we had a question around, I don't know if you saw the resource in the link in the chat, wondering if World Rugby or any other countries have similar set of data showing the status of return to play, and sent a link to the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. It looks like it's COVID related, if I'm correct in that. So wondering if World Rugby has done anything like that centrally to...
So there are many resources returning to play with regards to COVID. Like I said, on the COVID guidelines section, if you enter in there, the resources are all about how do you set out your return to play, how do you speak to the governments that are in the environment, and how would you then set your club up, your facility, your environment to be able to meet those guidelines to start returning to play. But COVID is a very specific governmental issue, so each nation will have a specific directive, and each club and sport, in our case rugby, so rugby union in each nation will have a guideline, and then each club will need to follow that guideline as it's met by the government. So it's quite tiered together, the COVID piece, with actually the environment of governments themselves.
Yeah, so I would say, so we as the regional association, we'd encourage you to just contact your local union. So if you're in Jamaica, reach out to the Jamaican Rugby Union. If you're in US, reach out to USA Rugby. They should have some guidelines in place for you about returning to training or returning to play. But if you do have any questions, let us know. Isabel, can you pass the host abilities over?
I sure can.
Thank you. So just as we are finishing up, I just wanted to send a huge thank you to all of our attendees. I know some have had to hop off, but we've been seeing in the chat just some really great thank yous to our panelists and for the information. It sounds like it was very valuable. So if you had a question that you did not get answered and you'd like to connect with one of our panelists or with myself or any other members of RAN, my contact information is on here. We would love to continue the conversation with you. Please feel free to reach out via email. Let us know what kind of questions you have or what other topics. And again, this has been recorded. We'll post it online with all the materials and the recording. And we hope to see you for some of our future sessions later this month. So thank you all and have a great evening.